are here on this day, just a couple of weeks away from Christmas, you're getting together maybe with family. You got together with family, maybe over the Thanksgiving holiday. You might be getting together with them over the Christmas season. You're going to get together with some people that you really love, you can't wait to see, and then you're also going to get together with the other people as well, right? Okay, and when you get together with your family, wouldn't it be amazing if when you're gathered around the table, there was no elephant in the room? Wouldn't it be amazing that when you're together with family, everybody just loved each other the way we're supposed to love each other? Wouldn't it be great when you get together with family, you don't have to psychoanalyze anybody before you get there or after you leave, trying to figure out why they are such a miserable person, all right? And I don't know if you do this or you've got the exit strategy about how you're going to get in and then get out, and we're going to stay so long. Some of you are going to go late. You're going to go early because so-and-so is going to be there. You don't want to be in the same place as them. Wouldn't it be great if we just didn't have any of that kind of drama when we got together with family? And how many of you know this? The older you get, the older you get, you know more about your family. I know more about my family in my 50s, and I have family that watches this on TV, so maybe this will get edited out. I don't know. But when you're in your 50s, you know more about your family than you knew in your teens or your 20s. Because in your teens and 20s, you just think everybody's great. And then you get in your 30s, 40s, and stuff starts to happen, and you hear conversation. It's like, I didn't know they were in the institution. I just didn't know that part of their story. Whatever the case is, we just learned stuff about family that we didn't know, we didn't want to know. And then when we get together with family, there can be this drama, this stuff that goes on in the room. We would love to get together with family and just know that when we get there, we're just loved and accepted, because all of us in this room, one thing I know about you, one thing I know about me, is that when we get together with people that we value, when we get together in a church, when we get together at our family around the table, we just want to know that we are loved, period. That it's not about performing, because some of you, when you get back home, you're going to go back and you're going to be with your parents, and your dad's going to say, well, so, and they're going to want to know about the business. They're going to want to know about your job and how much you're making, and you're going to have to go through, for some of you, you're going to have to go through all of your credentials with your parents or with somebody in the home to feel like you're important and have significance. For some of you, when you get together, it's going to be awkward because there's strains in the home. And do you know why there's strains in the home? Because there's no security in your marriage. Because for some of you in your marriage, you feel like in order to be loved and accepted by your spouse, there has to be this performance thing going on. They say they love you, but the actions show otherwise. And so you're trying so hard to work and to earn the acceptance of your spouse. For others of you, you don't really even know for sure what love is, because for you, love was skewed, it was perverted, it was destroyed when something was done to you and the word love was attached to it. And it all became demented and tormented and twisted and just wrong through your life. And so you're not really even sure what love and acceptance is all about, what it's supposed to look like. As a result, for some of us in this room, when we wanted to fill this love void inside of our hearts, we made a lot of compromises that we would never otherwise make. You see this all of the time when people are entering into a relationship and we see a guy or a girl get together, we go, what do they see in them? It might not that they see anything in them, but they see something in themselves, and what they see in themselves is this great void of love and unconditional love, and they're trying to fill it with the best thing they know how. Wouldn't it be great if when we got together with people, we just knew that we were accepted, period, regardless? Wouldn't it be great to know that we were just unconditionally loved? Last week we talked about forgiveness. One of the reasons it's so difficult to love unconditionally is because we don't understand the concept of forgiveness. One of the reasons it's difficult for us to forgive is because we don't understand the concept of unconditional love. We're going to read a story together today that really expresses in such a perfect way, in beautiful harmony, the need for love, the offer of love, and the lack of love. Because here's what I know again about all of us in this place. All of us just want to know that we're loved and accepted. Maybe this is your first time in this church. Maybe it's the first time in church in a long time. We're coming for the Christmas season. We're just coming. And one of the reasons you've stayed away from church is because you just knew, or you felt, or somebody made it known to you that the moment you walked through the doors, you didn't quite measure up to the standards. You wanted to be unconditionally accepted and loved. You thought the place to find it, the best place to find it would have been in the church. But when you got there, all of the concepts, the dreams, the imagination you had about the unacceptance of church people, it just came to fruition for you once again. I want to speak to that today a little bit. If you brought a Bible, I want to read to you a story we find in the book of Luke, the New Testament part of your Bible, Matthew, Mark, and then Luke. We're going to go to Luke. We're going to look at this little vignette in the life of Jesus Christ. Jesus gets an invitation to a Pharisee's home. Let me tell you just for a moment about a Pharisee. Dads, if your daughter came home and she had a Pharisee that she was dating, you'd have been pretty happy about that. He looked right. He smelled right. He acted right. He was everything that you'd want your daughter to marry. On the external, on the outside, it looked like he had it all together. The Pharisees thought that access to God was through obedience to the commands of God, which wasn't all wrong, but they missed a relationship. And what can happen sometimes when we think that access to God is through the way we act and the way we live, we think that access to God then becomes through our personal righteousness. And when we think that access and acceptance by God comes through our personal righteousness, we can become self-righteous. And a guy named Simon, we're going to read the story. We find out his name is Simon. Invites Jesus to his home. Well, let's just read the story and see what happens. We're going to begin in verse number 36 of Luke chapter 7. The story goes like this. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him, and so Jesus went to his home, and he sat down to eat. Let me take you to the Pharisee's home for a moment. This is how I envision the home. I envision the home to be nice by the standards of the times. I imagine in my mind a long table, carved wood, maybe some lamps burning on the table, maybe some lamps on shelves or mounted to the walls around. The room is dimly lit. Maybe a courtyard around this room. Historians tell us that when people of means or people of status and stature would throw a banquet meal, an important meal, the poor people from the city could come and watch. Can you imagine somebody coming to your Christmas meal and just watching you eat? And the reason for it was there were needy people, and when the meal was over and the honored guests at the table would get up and leave, the needy people could now eat the scraps that were at the table. I imagine the table to be fairly low, close to the ground, with cushions around the outside. Jesus would be with other guests, and Simon the Pharisee, probably leaning on one elbow, eating with the free hand off the table. Perhaps. There's a great number of guests seated around the table watching. As I read this story, I wonder if it was kind of awkward. You see, the Pharisees didn't think much of Jesus. Jesus didn't act inside the parameters that Pharisees had. We read this a lot, where a lot of times when Jesus did miracles, he did them on Saturday, which was the Sabbath day, the holy day, the day you're not supposed to do any work, and it just drove the Pharisees nuts. They didn't think much of Jesus. They were a little skeptical about him, and I think Simon invites Jesus to his house to get a first-hand look at Jesus. I don't think there was any relationship with him. I think in Simon's mind, as I read through this story, I think Simon wanted Jesus to prove himself worthy. If it wasn't an awkward setting yet, it was going to get more awkward in just a moment because of one of the guests that was there during the meal that day. And maybe there was murmuring amongst the guests around the table. And I don't know if there was any dialogue between Jesus and Simon. Maybe there's somebody that comes to your table like that when the family gets together. It's somebody that you don't really know. Might be somebody that lives in such a way you don't really approve of. But nevertheless, they're there at the table with you. It can be an awkward situation. Well, if it isn't awkward yet, it's going to get awkward as we read the story. Look what it says in verse 37. One of the guests there was a woman, a certain immoral woman from the city. Well, she heard that Jesus was going to be there, and so she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. She wouldn't be your typical dinner guest. I imagine that nobody invited her. Her name wasn't on the guest list. Let's say we've got Jesus and Peter, and I don't see your name on the list anywhere. But she was there at the meal. The interesting thing is the whole town knew this woman. Probably some of the men at the table knew this woman. And they knew her better than anybody else knew her. But nobody talked about that relationship. And she heard that Jesus was there. Jesus had a reputation, and she had a reputation. And so this day she knows this is her window of opportunity. This is her moment to have an encounter with Jesus. Everything that she's heard about Jesus may be seen from a distance. That day she comes with her alabaster jar, a jar that was made out of stone, carved stone, filled with an expensive perfume. And the only way to enjoy the contents of the inside was to break the slender neck of the top of that jar and then enjoy the contents on the inside. And so there's the woman. It's not awkward yet, but it's going to in a moment. Look at verse 38. She knelt behind Jesus at his feet. His feet are extended, I would imagine, some distance away from the table. She kneels at his feet, weeping. Jesus, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, feels every cooled, salty tear hitting his feet. And then she did what you would only do as a woman in private, or if you're an immoral woman, you let down your hair. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped those tears off with her hair, and then she kept kissing his feet, putting perfume on them. Historians tell us the perfume was something that would evaporate very quickly. Here she is at the feet of Jesus. Oh, the crown of the head is the holy place, and the unholy place at the bottom of the feet. And here she's come to humble herself, weeping over his feet, and the perfume now evaporating quickly from his feet, and the fragrance evaporating through the air. Just imagine if you were there at that meal, and you knew who the woman was. Awkward might be a word that you would use to describe the situation. Simon watches all of this. Simon is watching this, and I think Simon is thinking, you know what? Everything that I ever thought about Jesus now holds true. Because look what Simon thinks to himself in verse 39. Simon the Pharisee who had invited him saw this. He says to himself, not out loud, not publicly, not to those watching the meal. He thinks this in his mind. If this man were a prophet, well, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner. The implication or the inference is, I'm not. You know why I'm not a sinner? Because I keep the rules. Some of you in this room today, you know what? You didn't have to question mom and dad's approval of you because you kept the rules. Others of you in here, admittedly, and everybody is kind of joking, and yet there's still a sense of sting to it. You're the black sheep of the family. And you know why they're black sheep? Because you didn't keep the rules. And we joke about it today, but there's still a sting of pain inside of your heart about that whole thing, because in your mind you're thinking, everybody else was okay with mom and dad, and they could do no wrong, but then there was me. And maybe you're the sibling in the family that says, my brother, my sister, they just had a lot of problems in the family, just they were a rebel. I don't know what their problem was. Mom and dad loved them just like they loved the rest of us, and why they chose to do what they did, I don't know. And so now we start to think of ourselves as a little better than our siblings. Self-righteousness is a byproduct that can come so easily in a walk with God. And I think Simon saw himself righteous because for him, love and acceptance was conditional. And you see, Simon met all the conditions. But this woman, she hadn't met any of the conditions. So naturally, he should be righteous. You've loved others that way, and I've loved others that way. And we've been loved that way. And the story goes on in verse 40. Jesus answers his thoughts. Don't you love this? He says, Simon, 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 I have something to say to you. Now, I'm just thinking in my mind, if I'm self-righteous, I kind of know what Jesus is going to say. This is a great meal. I love what your decorator has done with the home. And you're a phenomenal guy, and I'm so proud of you for keeping the rules the way you have. So naturally, Simon responds, well, go ahead, teacher, Simon replied. You're not ready for what's to come. Verse 41, Jesus told him a story. He said, Simon, Simon, there was a man who loaned money to two people. 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 to the other. Maybe Simon's thinking, I think I know where this story's going. I don't like it. He says, verse 42, but neither of them could repay him, so neither of them could repay him. Neither could repay him. So he kindly forgave both, canceling their debts. And then he asks the question that really puts Simon on the spot. He says, who do you suppose loved him more? Now, as I'm thinking of this and I'm putting myself in Simon's place, I'm thinking, I bet I know how Simon wants to answer. Because if he knows this story is already about him, I think if I was Simon, I'd be like, wait. Here, you need to hear the whole story, and let me explain myself and justify myself. But he can't do that because it's a very simple story. It's a very simple illustration, and it demands a very simple answer, and Simon has an audience. All these people are waiting to hear the answer. It's kind of like you in third grade when you had to go solve the math problem on the chalkboard in front of the whole class. You better get it right. Verse 43, as Simon says, well, I suppose. Can you just hear well, I suppose the one for whom he canceled the larger debt. He answered it right from his mouth, but I don't know if he answered it right from his heart. And Jesus says, well, that's right. That's right. You answered correctly. Jesus tells a story to say grace canceled the debt. You know, people who understand grace offer grace. People who understand love offer love. Let me step on toes for just a moment here. Give me permission. Especially to those that have been in the church world the longest. Church people are the most dangerous people. Because if we've grown up in the church, we're the guy in the story that only owes 50 pieces of silver. And we can be in church Sunday by Sunday, and we can look at those who don't look right or smell right or act right, and they don't fit the church model. Well, it's pretty obvious they're the ones in the story that owe 500 pieces of silver. And some of the most dangerous people in the church are the ones who have a partial understanding of the love and grace of God, but not a full understanding of the love and the grace of God. And then you get these people that come to church, and they had a past in sex and drugs and rock and roll and all kinds of illicit things, and they come to our church services and they disrupt everything with their shouting and cheering and clapping and wearing hats on their head and blue jeans, and they just don't fit them. And you know what? They're the people in the story that just understand all of a sudden what it is to be set free. We've lived under freedom, and we don't have the appreciation for it like people who find it for the first time. And all of us are candidates for that. Jesus is not done with Simon yet. I bet Simon wishes he was. Verse 44, he turns to the woman. He didn't stop the woman. He just let her continue on because he knew who she was. He turned to the woman and he said, Simon, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she's washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. Not done yet. Look at the next verse. He says, you didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she's not stopped kissing me on my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. Jesus is saying, much like he would maybe speak to us, you've been a guest in somebody else's home, and you've entertained other people in your home. If you came to the Wallsteads' home, there's a closet right by the front door. We would want to know if we could take your jacket from you, so that we could rifle through the pockets and look for things. And we would do the courtesy of helping you with your coat and hanging up your coat, and then we would want to make sure that you got a preferential seat in the house, as long as it wasn't mine. We would ask you if you'd like something. Do you need a glass of water? Would you like something to drink? Can we do something? And we do that for people that we value and we honor. There's other people that come into our home and either we don't like them or they have refrigerator rights because we know them so well, right? And they just walk in and make themselves at home. And Jesus came to Simon's home that day, and Simon didn't help him with his coat. He didn't offer the best seat. He didn't get him a glass of water. He didn't do any of that, because I think in Simon's mind, Jesus was going to have to earn that. Because I think for Simon, he was a little bit above Jesus in all of this. And Jesus was going to come to the meal that day and have to prove himself worthy of the acceptance of Simon. Here's what I know about us when we make compromises to be loved. A regret will usually follow. A lot of you are in that situation. There was a relationship you had. There was an addiction that you had. There was that night that you had. Just trying anything to fill the love bank inside of you. And usually regret follows compromise. But joy follows sacrifice, and this woman comes and sacrifices to Jesus. Sacrificing, coming forward. And I mean, everybody knew her reputation, but now I'm coming forward and humbling myself before all of these people. And she gave what was most expensive to her, that alabaster jar of perfume. Jesus says, after he reminds Simon about his discourteousness to Jesus, he says in verse 47, I tell you, her sins, looking at the woman, and they are many, aren't they all for all of us? Well, they've been forgiven. And so she has shown me much love. And then Jesus kind of concludes with this, but a person who is forgiven little shows only little love. Now, in the story that he told Simon, both of them had been forgiven. The one that owed 50 and the one that owed 500. They'd both forgiven, and they'd been forgiven out of the kindness of the heart of the person that loaned them the money. One had a great appreciation for the debt forgiveness, and the other had little appreciation for the debt forgiveness. One saw themselves as being self-right, and the other one knew that they had no righteousness in and of themselves, and they needed all the righteous, they needed the grace that was offered by the one that made the loan. Wouldn't it be great if when you get together with family in the next weeks, there was no conditions attached to the love that you desire? That when you sat down in the living room and everybody's just sitting around staring at the TV set with a silent football game going before you, and wouldn't it be great to have a conversation with no elephant in the room? That there was just absolute peace and unconditional love and acceptance. That it didn't matter what kind of a job you had or didn't have. That it didn't matter that marriage ended in divorce. That it didn't matter that you had made some compromise in the past and the whole family still won't let you live it down. Wouldn't it be great if you could just be loved and accepted that way? Wouldn't it be great if when people came to church on a Sunday morning, they just knew that this was the most loving and accepting place in the city of Williston? Jesus said it a little bit like this in John 13:34. Love each other. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. That's what Jesus said. Well, how did Jesus love us? While we were still sinners? He died for us. For God so loved the world that he gave his son Jesus. He didn't wait for us to move first. He did. Maybe for you, you need to start to make that movement in your family. Dads, let me talk to you for just a moment. Let me tell you something. You have sons and daughters in your home, or maybe grown sons and daughters that longed to hear you say, I love you. I love you. You know how love was proven in your house? Food on the table. You had a roof over your head. You had clothes on your back. And some of you dads, you had a hard time expressing affection to your kids because you never got it from the one that you wanted it from, and that was your own parents. And it's going to be an awkward, difficult conversation. I'm telling you, moms and dads, your children yearn to hear you say, I love you and I'm proud of you. And mom and dad, let me just tell you something. If they don't hear it from you, they're going to find somebody that will tell them that. And it's probably not the person that you approve. But they'll make a compromise to fill the love bank. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to do that? Wouldn't it be great if we could just love people unconditionally? Maybe we're the ones that just need to offer that love, unconditional love. How do you do that? Let me just give you 3 very simple things to do, and then we're gonna close in prayer. If you struggle loving people unconditionally, maybe it would be good if you could put on their shoes and walk in them for a little while. There's a reason that people are as they are, and when you hear their story, you've not heard their whole story. You've not heard their whole story. I find this especially when I talk to people who think grandma and grandpa are almost like gods. They're amazing people. They could do no wrong, but your parents have an entirely different story because their relationship was completely different with them. And you think, how could my parents get so messed up with such amazing grandparents? But the relationship was completely different. You need to go back and live life through the shoes of your parents sometimes, or through the people in your family, to experience the things that they experienced and get an understanding as to why they are as they are. There's a reason for it. Walk in their shoes for a little while. A second way to unconditionally love people is to pray for them. The more you pray for somebody, the more you like them and the more you love them. You say, Pastor, I just want to be honest here. I don't want to pray for them. I get that. A third way, and we're going to talk about this a little bit next week, is just being generous to them. Generous to them. Loving them. Sacrificing for them. Before they do anything that you think deserves a sacrifice. Isn't that kind of what Jesus did for us? Today, I would dare say there are some that need to experience the unconditional love that's waiting for you. Maybe you have thought wrongly about Jesus, that in order to earn the acceptance and love of Jesus, I have to act a certain way. Do you know how many people I talk to in the course of time that say, I would love to get right with God, but before I get right with God, I have to get my life right? You can't do that on your own. You just come and just, look, Jesus has already accepted you. He's waiting for you to accept him. Some of you need to offer unconditional love and acceptance to your family, to your spouses. Don't assume they know that you love them. Tell them that you love them. Show them that you love them. Men, this might be the last sermon I ever preach to you after I tell you this. Men, if there are dirty dishes on the counter at home today, would you wash them for your wife? Remember 911, because your wife is going to have a coronary when you do this, right? Wash the dishes. You helped make them dirty. Clean the bathroom. You helped make it dirty. And you know what? The vacuum cleaner is like a power tool in your hand. It's amazing. It's incredible. Okay? Wives, don't have a coronary. Stand back and go, I'm so proud of you. You just applaud them. Don't make a big fuss over it. Just love them. Moms and dads, your kids here, if you are not affectionate with them, it's time to start and say, I love you. I know that if you've grown up in a family similar to mine, that is a difficult expression sometimes. I remember being here, visiting family over a holiday years ago. A Scandinavian home. In fact, some of my family might even watch this on TV when I tell this. And we're talking about expressing love and appreciation in the family. Now, we didn't do that in my home. Maybe you don't do it in your home either, but somebody needs to start, right? I remember my grandmother saying, well, I think we should do that more. We need to tell each other that we appreciate each other and love each other more. We just need to do that. Well, it wasn't long after that, in the same day that Robin and Nathan and I were packing up, getting ready to go back to our little town where we pastored. Grandma walks out to the car with us. We were at her house. I hug Grandma and I get my lips right down by her ear and I say, Grandma, I love you. Yeah. But on her deathbed, I whispered in Grandma's ear, I love you, Grandma. And she said, I love you too. Huge words. And somebody's waiting for you to say those words today.